And let's get started. So today is our second Thrive Services coffee break, clean claim submission. We're going to go through essentially an overview of the best practices for creating as few errors as possible when submitting claims. Molly and I will be your presenters today. I am Ashley Secord. I'm a marriage and family therapist in the state of Minnesota and also licensed in South Carolina. I also own Thrive Billing Services and a private practice in Minnesota. And
I'm
Molly.
I'm Molly Gregg. I've been with Thrive for 4 years now. And I have been in the billing and credentialing world for over a decade. And one of my favorite parts of what I do is actually educating providers about billing. I personally believe that this should be part of continuing education, because without billing and credentialing practices, you won't be able to get paid. So my hope from this coffee break is that you'll get to learn something new. So let's go ahead and get started.
Excellent. We have a few events coming up in addition to our recent intro to billing and clean claim submissions. We are also doing a provider training at the beginning of next month, the Friday before Labor Day. It's essentially going to help providers set up their EHR so that they can submit claims to insurance by the end of that training. So this is something that we typically charge for this is a service we provide at Thrive Services. This is a significantly less expensive way to go about this service. So we wanted to have that as an offering as well, because we get asked about EHR setup all the time. Additionally, I will be doing essentially a conversation about Optum's supervisory protocol, which is their group, the audit for their group contracts. It's a pretty intensive audit. And so it's kind of nice to have a walkthrough. Optum does a really nice job walking through it as well. They offer a lot of resources and tools. I thought it might be helpful to have a therapist that's gone through the process and had a lot of anxiety about it, talk through it, and share my experience with it. And additionally, we're going to have two sort of networking events, more of a conversation with Nicole Keeber-Lewis, who is a business coach and was also a therapist. And she wrote the book, How to Love Your Business, which is essentially preventing past trauma from impacting how you run your business or allowing your business from traumatizing you in the future. I love the concept. I met her earlier this year and we spent a lot of hours just chatting, like how she got to how she came up with the subject around the book. And I feel like it's something therapists would be certainly interested in. So we'll be connecting at the end of September. And then lastly, in October, we'll be reviewing independent contract agreements with David Holt. David Holt is an attorney in Minnesota who I would say, pretty well known in the Minnesota community for independent contract agreements and essentially sort of anything revolving around the legal side of being a therapist. So he's a great resource and I feel lucky that we get to connect with him.
Awesome.
Excellent. So I'm going to transfer it back to you, Molly.
Cool. All right. So today we're going to kind of go over best practices for clean claim submission. We will go over kind of common billing errors and claim rejections, some strategies for following up on those unpaid or denied claims, and then a little bit of the explanation of benefit terminology and definitions that you might see on either a paper remittance advice or an electronic remittance advice. So next we've got some just baselines questions that I wanted to get some feedback on. So the first one is, let me pull up my little poll. All right. Where is everybody from? So you can go ahead and if you want, you can respond to that in the chat. So where is everybody from? Nice. Fantastic. Minnesota. That's exciting. Awesome. Cool. Oh, so then our next one we have here is going to be a poll question. So did you attend the last coffee break, our intro to billing? Awesome. Cool. Great. All right, so the next one we have is, are you currently processing claims? Either through your EHR or via paper. Good. That's what we like to hear. All right, so then, awesome.
Great.
So then the last one, the next one I have is, which EHR are you currently using? We've got Headway. Okay, awesome. Headway. That's a new one for me. Cool. Therapy Notes. Therapy Notes, Headway. Fantastic. And then our last poll question I have for you guys is, your EHR set up to receive ERAs, or electronic remittance advice? Also, cool. Fantastic. Good, good. Okay. Great. Awesome. Not sure yet. All right. Well, fantastic. So we'll hopefully be able to go over and help with anything that might come up with some of that, those ERA rejections. All right. So thanks so much for participating. All right. So now we're going to jump into the meat and potatoes. So this is just kind of an overview of the billing cycle. This is kind of what we talked about last time. But this time we're going to actually start with submitting claims, our claim reconciliation, and then follow up on those claim issues. All right. So I wanted to note before we started, this is kind of what we went over in the intro to billing coffee break, the importance of data collection. So prior to beginning your claim submission, you really should ensure that you have established within your practice, you have established your credentialing, your contracting, all of that, but also make sure that you have gotten your data collection, you have a process for benefit verifications, and a process for preparing your claims. Some of that client data that you're going to want to collect is going to be essential in making sure you do have a clean claim process and reduce those denials. So making sure you have the name, date of birth, phone number, the correct administrative sex that matches the insurance, social security numbers, hard copies of all of the client IDs, and a credit card or payment method on file. And we believe that we have four best practices that we think should probably be implemented in most practice situations, making sure you have that hard data, those hard copies of the insurance card, driver's license, credit cards if you can, verifying your benefits ahead of time before your first session can decrease some denials. And then making sure that you know what your client responsibility is going to be, and if possible, collect that before you actually send the claims out. So at the end of that appointment, before that appointment, and then just reviewing your billing on a regular basis. So like I said, verifying benefits prior can help to decrease a lot of those claim denials, knowing if your client has active coverage. You can do that calling the insurance company from the number on the back of the card. You can verify those benefits via the provider portals. And by doing this ahead of time, you can also see if that client has a secondary insurance and asking them clarifying questions about that secondary policy and making sure that you have it. And then our last step is preparing your claims, making sure you have a valid diagnosis code. Oftentimes for mental and behavioral health, we use F codes, but you'll also see sometimes Z codes. So just ensuring that you have the appropriate primary diagnosis that is billable and is active. And then ensuring that you have the correct CPT code and modifier combinations if needed. Those two things will reduce those claim denials. So making sure you have the right time frames on your CPT codes. If you saw that client for 20 minutes, make sure you're billing a 20-minute CPT code, not a 45-minute CPT code. If you see the client telehealth, make sure you have a telehealth modifier. And then that last step is going to be making sure you have your notes signed and your documentation complete. And then you are ready to submit. So once you submit those claims, you will get a claim determination of some kind. And that will usually look like a EOB or an ERA, and you'll see things like payments, client responsibilities, adjustments, or denials. The best case scenario is you get a payment with a simple adjustment reason that we'll go over. So the next couple of slides, we're actually going to look at what some of those rejection or client responsibility, adjustment, and denial codes will be and what that terminology is going to look like on that ERA. So the first one is a positive one. It's a
Molly,
responsibility. Yes.
I'm going to raise my hand. I just wanted to pause for a second and see if anybody had any questions about the sort of before you submit and receive the ERAs.
Yeah.
So any questions so far?
I'll pull up my chat too.
Looks like we're going good. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted.
That's fine. I forgot to ask if anybody had any. I got so excited about my denials. Yeah, so patient responsibility will often show up on your remittance advice as a PR followed by a number. And those numbers are usually going to be 1, 2, or 3. And depending on basically those insurance verifications that you did before you saw your client, those should match. So PR1 is deductible. That is the first thing that has to be completely met before the insurance pays, right? So, which is why it's PR1. The second thing is PR2, which is a coinsurance amount. This is usually going to be a percentage of the amount that is due from the client. It's going to be a percentage of your approved amount, not your billed amount. This is also something that if that client does have a secondary insurance, you can bill that secondary insurance for that coinsurance amount. And then that PR3 is going to be your copay. And that's going to be a standard number that that client will owe no matter how much of that service is covered. It's a fixed amount, $25, $15, whatever that coverage might be. And again, you can get that from that initial benefit verification. Anybody have questions about the PRs? Awesome. Okay, so the next group are called CO or contractual obligations. These are a little bit different. So the standard one that you're going to see on every single payment that you have is going to be a CO45. And that CO45 isn't a true denial. It is the difference between the billed amount and your contracted rate. And that's the amount that you're going to adjust off, and you can never charge a client that amount. It's basically your agreement with the insurance company that you're going to accept their X rate, right? The other ones you'll see are denials are going to be that CO146 or the M76. They basically mean the same thing and are stating that the diagnosis code that you used isn't valid or is inaccurate. So like I mentioned earlier, using an F code as primary will decrease the chance of you getting that denial. That F code, though, does have to actually be active. So making sure that you know which codes are currently active every single year in October, the ICD-10 or ICD groups go through and they reactivate, create new codes, and deactivate old ones that are not as descriptive. So a lot of times that's when you'll see that is when they have terminated a code effective October 1st. A really great resource for that is the ICD-10 database. And you can go in there and they'll give you a whole list of all of the codes that are currently active and inactive. And it's also fun to just go in and look at ICD-10 codes too. It's fun. So the other time you'll see this is if you use a Z code as primary. I know sometimes you'll have a client who comes in and maybe in their first intake appointment, they're really concerned about smoking cigarettes, right? So you're using that tobacco cessation Z code as your primary. More often than not, even though it's an intake, the insurance will deny that because they consider Z codes as more like knowledge, like this is information about the client in addition to what they're actually being seen for, which is silly because if they're coming for cigarette cessation, tobacco cessation, then that should probably be their primary. So just use your best judgment, but most often that's when you'll see that M76 denial. The other one is a COB7 or a CO242, and that will be a credentialing, most often a credentialing issue. Either the system has not been updated within that insurance's electronic system, or maybe you actually weren't eligible to bill on that data service. So knowing your effective date with each insurance will help to reduce that. And just making sure that you are eligible to provide those services. So don't provide some psychiatric code if you're not a psychiatrist, right? So just knowing what you should and should not bill for those specific ones.
And that information, some of that information might be in your insurance contracts.
Yes, that's true. Yes, absolutely. So the next set is an OA code. They're called other adjustments. And these guys can be all kinds of things. But the ones that we see most often are going to be an OA 23, which usually refers to a coordination of benefits. So if a client hands you a Blue Cross and Blue Shield card and says, this is the only insurance I have, and you get an OA 23, the likelihood that the insurance company is showing an additional payer is extremely high. You will also see this OA 23 if you submit them to a secondary insurance. And it's basically going to say, hey, this dollar amount was paid by somebody else, so we're not going to pay that. And if it's a secondary insurance, you know that you already got paid from the primary. And that amount should match. If it doesn't, then that should raise a red flag. The other one is an OA 257. And this is a funky one because this is related to the client's premiums. And you usually get a letter related to these. After the first month, you will start seeing this OA 257. Basically what this is the client has not paid their premium and they usually have a 90-day grace period. Within that time frame, if at any point the client pays part or all of that premium, the insurance will automatically go back and reprocess those previous claims and pay them accordingly. If the client does not pay that premium in that 90-day grace period, then the insurance will effectively be terminated and all of those initial determinations of denial and client responsibility, 100% client responsibility, will be permanent. So it's just something to keep in mind if you see something like that, to let your clients know, hey, it looks like there's been a denial from the insurance company stating that your premium hasn't been paid. So you can always have those conversations, and the client is the only one who can fix that. No matter how hard you try, you can't fix it. So some additional codes that you also might see are things like an OA 253 if you see Medicare clients. This is basically the amount that we as providers are paying to be a part of the Medicare network. And it's usually like $1 or $2 here and there, but it will be on every single one of your payments. And it will reduce it by that OA 253 amount. You cannot recoup that from the client. It's just part of your agreement with Medicare. You'll also see an OA or a CO18. That means there's a duplicate claim on file. Usually that happens if you accidentally send out a claim and you go, oh gosh, I forgot to put my telehealth modifier on. And you say, it's okay, I'm just going to pop it on there and resend it. Likely that first claim will process and deny because you've misplaced that modifier. And that second claim that you sent will come back as that OA 18. If you've only sent one claim and you get an OA 18 denial, then you've got to call the insurance and say, hey guys, I only sent one claim. And sometimes it's an internal issue with their system. That's rare, but sometimes it happens. The other PR codes you'll see are going to be additional patient responsibilities, and these exist when the insurance coverage has terminated, or either prior, they have no coverage for that date because it hasn't started yet, or they have no coverage because it ended before your date of service. Again, those can be fixed easily if you're doing your benefit verifications, and you can catch those ahead of time. And then the PR 31 is that patient it doesn't have a terminated date. It doesn't have a future date. They just can't find that patient. Usually those happen when you have a name mismatch, gender or sex mismatch, or you've flipped numbers around on the ID card. And then the PR 22, that's usually a coordination of benefits. That means that the insurance is showing there is an additional payer. Again, that's another one that the client has to fix. We can't do anything about it. But best practice for that is to contact the client, say, hey, we got this denial from insurance. Do you have an additional payer? If not, please go ahead and contact your insurance and request that they make a reprocess of those as soon as possible. Any questions about those, guys? I know it was a lot of info. All right.
Ultimately, we want to make sure you have exposure to the different, like the different codes, the OA, the CO, the PR, that when you see those initials listed, that you have an idea of what those mean and where that money is going to. Those codes are going to give you a lot of information, especially if a claim is being rejected, there's no payment. That's where you're going to want to look to see why, essentially.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. So the most common billing errors and denials that I see are invalid or inactive diagnosis codes, missing or inaccurate authorizations. The session limit has been exceeded, that the client isn't eligible, that there is an incorrect modifier and CPT combo, or timely filing. So all of these, in my opinion, are pretty avoidable data entry issues. So these are things that you can actually stop that denial before it even happens. So ensuring that you're getting all of that data from the client entered correctly, verifying those benefits. If a client does need an authorization for mental health services, make sure you're getting that before you continue sessions. Usually the intake is covered. You don't usually need an authorization for an intake. A lot of times that session limit being exceeded, again, has to do with the client's specific policy. So that benefit verification at the first appointment will tell you if they have a certain number of appointments for mental health in a year. And then timely filing can always be avoided. That is the easiest one to avoid, because if you're filing your claims within a 24 to 48 hour window, signing them and completing all that documentation, you should be fine. Timely filing limits are about 90 days, but best practice is submit your claims within that 24 to 48 hour window. Any questions?
There's also a benefit to submitting claims inaccurately, because then they've at least been submitted within that time frame. And even if you're I don't wish this upon anyone, but dealing with claim issues for months and months, which we all, like Molly and I have a lot of experience with,
yes.
You're not running up against that timely filing problem. Right. So sometimes even if the issue is on the insurance end, getting that claim submitted versus holding on to them and waiting until things are cleaned up before submission, sometimes that's appropriate and sometimes it's not.
Yeah,
we err on the side of just submitting claims, even if things aren't completely clean, so that we don't run into that issue. Because that once you're past that timely filing limit, it's essentially their trump card to not pay you.
Yeah, absolutely. And as long as it's something that's, not avoidable, like if you're in the process of dealing with something with your contract, submit that claim. Yeah. But if it's something like you're not sure if the diagnosis code is accurate or not, like if you don't know if it's valid, find out if it's valid, because that's an easy fix. And that one, a lot of the client and diagnosis and CPT issues, those are all fixable. So
Right.
just know what you're putting in there. But if it's something that you can't fix in that moment before you send the claim, always go ahead and submit that claim. So then you have that additional time frame to correct it.
Right. Just asked a question. So if you file after 90 days, they won't pay.
With some insurances, the shortest one is Optum. And I tell people 90 days because that is the one insurance. Optum will absolutely not budge off of that 3-month window. Blue Cross and Aetna are 180 days. And then Medicare Medicare, Medicaid, government policies like that are a year. UCare also is a year, since we're all in Minnesota. But again, trying to get those in beforehand is going to be better.
Yeah.
And you can always look it up and see if you have like one of those little bitty mom and pop insurances. You can always reach out to them and ask, hey, what is your timely filing limit?
Yeah.
And that is, yeah.
I was just going to say it's typically between 90 and 180 days. And I just wouldn't push it. I would get claims submitted as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
yeah. And there are always things that come up, and it might be something where, you couldn't get them submitted, but if you have 3 months, if you say, hey, 90 days is the ultimate, then you at least know you're safe. Right. So I always say 89 days to be on the absolute safe side. Yeah. So some of the errors that you might what they might look like outside of that, things like getting a payment at 100%, or noticing that you have not been paid in a 60 or 90 day plus time frame, that's probably an issue. Or if you have received a remittance advice but no associated payment, those are all things that should be raising red flags for you, that could say, hey, there's an issue, there's an error. So some of the things you can do, you can pull aging reports at that 60-day mark and back, so 60 plus days, and review your outstanding claims for those and see if you've gotten any kind of information back from the insurance that may have slipped through the cracks, or if you haven't gotten anything at all. And then you can kind of start your process of reaching out if needed. The other thing is you can pull a revenue report to see if there has been 100% payments on claims. I don't tend to do that because it's time consuming and tedious. It's just better to address those issues when you get that ERA instead of waiting to pull that report. So just address it up front. So I do have another question for you. Are there any specific insurance issues that you have come across for your practice? If not, that's fine too.
I can bring up one that I experienced recently with a provider. I have a contractor at my office who was frequently getting rejected for TRICARE claims, and they are fully licensed. They have no issues with any other claims or any of the other insurances that they're contracted with, except for TRICARE. And even when they would submit claims, like their supervisees would submit claims, there was issues. And when we dug into it a little deeper, we found out that the credentialing on the insurance end had been messed up, and they had registered them as a different license type or a non-license type. So everything that was being submitted was being denied or paid at a lower rate because it was being processed as a pre-licensed, I think as a pre-licensed person. And then all of the supervisee claims for this insurance were being denied because they weren't considered the level to be able to have a supervisee. So it was just this really big mess that we had to go back and fix the credentialing on, which involved a lot of phone calls and a lot of follow-up and some aggravation between, not necessarily between me and the provider, but the provider was, not getting compensated appropriately. It was also getting compensated at a significantly lower rate. So there was just a bunch of hiccups, and some of those clues were those rejections and the lower payment, that sort of thing. But sometimes it's easy to miss those things when it's an insurance that you don't necessarily like. It's not one that we're frequently using, or we don't have a lot of members who utilize it. So so it's taking a little bit more time to get that fixed, and then you go back and have all those claims resubmitted under the right license type. So that's sort of like a weird issue that we've come across, but not necessarily mentioned during our meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a great lead in to when do you actually contact those insurance companies? When is what is an appropriate denial or reason to contact insurance? And for your instance, credentialing issues are a great reason to contact the insurance company, because in this case, it was nothing that we as the billing person or as the providers know what's going on, because all of your credentialing is submitted correctly. So reaching out and saying, hey, what's going on? Talking to provider relations and saying, listen, this is my contract. This is what I have. Other things, that inaccurate payment. So that's a red flag. Hey, I should be getting paid at a higher rate. Why am I not getting paid at that higher rate? And then again, out of network, if you're getting a denial that says, hey, you're a provider that's not in network, so we're not going to reimburse you at that in-network rate, or we're not going to pay you at all. So those are really good reasons to contact the insurance companies. Again, so that credentialing issue is usually a CO 185 that states that the rendering provider is not eligible to perform the services billed. So that's one that you might see in relation to that. So once you get those and you see those denials and you've determined, hey, I need to contact the insurance, that's when you can start your process in following up on claims. And this is a big one. So the very first thing that you want to start to do is you want to take a breath, get all your patients ready, get all of your information set, right? Ensure that you have a lot of time available to reach out. You will be sitting on hold. Once you get a hold of that appropriate representative, or any representative, if it is a credentialing issue, make sure you're asking to be connected with provider relations, because the claims department cannot help you and they will send you in circles. If they can't connect you directly, get that phone number, write it down and save it in your Rolodex, on a sticky note, wherever it is that you keep important information, save that phone number. You will be calling back. So the next thing you want to make sure you have is a reference number from that representative who is helping you with that issue. That reference number, save it in a place, create a document for tracking, whatever it might be that helps you with your process. Put that reference number there with the representative's name, contact information if possible, and then that specific number and what that resolution might be. And then also what that time frame is for the issue to be resolved. Once you hit that date of the issue that should have been resolved, it's when you call back, use that reference number, and move forward with your tracking on that. The other thing you can do if it becomes too time consuming is you can always reach out, outsource, and utilize a billing agency, utilize a billing person that you know, be able to kind of allocate that time to someone else. So just ensure that you're getting the best for your time in that respect. So in instances like that, where you are now having to reach out, you can always contact us. We can help. Those are things that we actually do. So on a daily basis, we are updating your contracts. We are eligible to help with your credentialing. We can make sure that your EHR is set up and all of that client data is there. We can also just contact the insurance company for you and get a resolution. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions for us before I move on to our next slide? Any things that pop up about any of the denials or anything like that? Awesome.
You were pretty thorough, Molly.
That's what I aim to be. Cool. All right. So then I'm going to pop over to this slide. So like I said, some of the things we can help you with in this instance, credentialing might be something that you might need. We also offer monthly billing packages and also those special projects that would encompass all of those claim issues and those claim issue follow-ups, getting those ERA or EFT set up if you're not receiving those payments. Those are all things that we can help you out with. So I already asked any questions, but the last thing is we want to kind of say thank you for joining us and being a part of our virtual event. So we are offering a $50 off of any of our services. Since it is clean claims, go ahead and email me by Monday with scrubbing bubbles 50 to keep those claims clean. And also we have our QR code on the page too. So if you feel like reaching out, doing a free quote, definitely feel free. Do you have anything else, Ashley?
I think that is it.
Awesome.
If you ever run into any issues with your billing or getting your billing set up, just think of us and we can assist you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you all at our next one.